Okay, I'm going to be talking on the subject of gender identity and sexuality education in schools, and I'm both going to be describing the threat that we are facing, but also some positive things that we can do about this. Could I have the first slide, please? Now, as we wait for that first slide to come, I'd like to just address the question of the difference between a bill, a policy, and an act. A bill is a draft act. An act is a law which you have to obey. You don't. A bill is just a proposal. A policy is something that the government writes as a guideline for their employees and the organs of state. Okay, but you don't have to, by law, obey it. In the words of when I challenged the Western Cape state law advisor on their gender identity policy, she said to me, the school governing bodies, if they hate our policy, they can throw it in the bin. Okay, so we have to be aware that these policies exist, but it is your right, if you are on the school governing body, to throw it in the bin and ignore it. Okay, but you may get some flack from the government, but you won't be put in jail. If it is a law, then that can have criminal sanctions. That is much more serious, and regulations are put under laws to put in the detail, but you also have to obey them. Okay, so there's a huge difference between a law and a policy. Now, all of this can be a bit confusing because there is essentially the strategy that our opponents are putting in is to create a raft of many laws, many policies, many regulations to push their agenda of confused sexuality and confused gender onto children and onto the rest of society, and also to try to silence us. So we need to be aware of these things. We have to fight against them, but we also have to understand our rights in order to fight against them. So can I have the next slide, please? Firstly, the Department of Basic Education has put together a gender policy, which is, I think, copied straight from activist groups overseas. It's not a South African thing at all. Then the second thing that they have is something called comprehensive sex education. Now, sex education was originally introduced to the curriculum, and we protested strongly against it in about 2003, but they didn't put the detail into that. And what happened is that most teachers and school governing bodies just said, okay, well, we're going to interpret that the way we want to, and in order to do that, we are going to interpret it possibly within a Christian framework, and thus not tell children all about things like LGBT and abortion. The activists were then unhappy with this, and what they did is that they tried to force through then comprehensive. So they want the children to be taught everything. They want their innocence to be taken away, and they want to be taught not only the facts, but that this is normative and you're free to experiment, and also to be connected with outside organizations that can influence them to have contraceptives and abortions without parental knowledge or consent. And even after they'd introduced that comprehensive sex education, still the teachers didn't want to do all of this. And so they then introduced what they call scripted lesson plans to say, well, the teacher has to teach exactly what is in the lesson plan to make it more specific. Then we've just had in the past year the early childhood development gender guidelines, which goes from completely the date from grade R when the child starts in school. Already the teachers are being told that this is how they must teach children. Then there's the learner pregnancy policy, which has already been referred to, but note it is a policy, which means you can ignore it. But they're proposing to turn it into regulations. If they turn it into regulations, you cannot ignore it. Then there can be criminal sanctions if you do not. Then there's the BELA bill, and I think we've heard a lot about that, but the big concern is that the BELA bill takes a whole lot of powers away from parents, and it also would make this learner pregnancy policy be allowed to be turned into regulations, which we don't want. Then there's a whole lot of laws which are working to silence and intimidate us from speaking our convictions. So there is the hate speech bill, which is currently with the president, which potentially you can go to jail by saying something offensive against LGBT or activists and such like. Then there is something called the conversion bill, which thankfully has been shelved, which is to say, well, you can't give help to somebody who is a homosexual or is got gender confusion problems. Otherwise, you would be doing a criminal offense. Now, thankfully, that has been shelved, and we hope it never comes back again. Then there's the Unified Marriage Bill, which destroys the definition of marriage to make it just a confusion of however many partners you want to have with whatever genders you want to have, which is really a big problem. Then there's the Equality Amendment Bill, which would mandate every organization, including churches and businesses, to implement a code of conduct which would promote likely these woke values. So put these all together, and what they're really trying to do is push us into a situation like Hong Kong, where the Chinese government comes and takes over the democracy and the freedom and takes it all away from you, except that unlike China, they want to push all these anti-family policies and laws. Next slide. Then there is the capture of various organs of state, which include the Western Cape Children's Commissioner, the Human Rights Commission, the Commission for Gender Equality, and in many cases, increasingly the judiciary. And these people, and especially the law schools, which are churning out these lawyers, and these law students who go against this woke nonsense get threatened with not graduating. So, and I personally was thrown out of UCT Law School, told by the dean there that, you know, my views were contrary to the Constitution. He couldn't name which clause, but anyway, that's the democracy they've got. Then there are lawsuits which are being proposed at the moment, which will be in the courts possibly within a month. The one is Stellenbosch High School, where they want to force them to allow a boy to go into the girls' bathroom just because that boy poses as a different gender. Then there is sorry, can we have the slides? This is needed for the presentation. Then the Beaumont Primary has got a different proposal, which is to try to get a girl allowed into a boy's bathroom, and also to have that girl be allowed to swim topless, okay? Because she needs to pretend that she's a boy now, and so can wear boys' swimming gear. Okay, so this is a threat to schools in three main areas. One is bathrooms, pronouns, and girls' sport, because any boy who's got testosterone inside him is going to perform much better than a girl in sports. So that is unfair. Secondly, the boys are rough and they are liable to injure the girl in the process of the sports. So we need to protect girls' rights. And it's quite amazing to me that the feminists have no backbone to stand up to this. And so it actually ends up now the Christians who are defending women's rights and girls' rights. So can I have the next slide, please? Go on, next one, please. Next one. Okay, this is some pictures from Beaumont Primary School, which is in Somerset West, and this is the swimming pool that they are now suing in a lawsuit that will probably cost millions of rands, and the school has to raise money from the parents to defend against this foreign money because they want a girl to be allowed to swim topless in that pool, okay? But not only that, if they win this lawsuit, that will then, they want that to apply to every other school in the country as well, not just that one, okay? And the same for Stellenbosch. So this is a double-barreled attack. And the people who are pushing the lawsuits, unbelievably, the one at Stellenbosch High is called the Women's Legal Center, although they are not speaking for women, in my opinion. And the one here is the Legal Resources Center, which was an anti-apartheid organization with some reputation, but has now gone in my view, crazy woke, and we need to challenge that. If we could have the next slide, please. Now, in terms of this comprehensive sex education, some of the pictures in this thing I cannot put on public display because they are or they are pornographic, and I wouldn't want a child or anybody to see that in public. I have cut that thing off halfway because I don't want to put that out in public. But this is a coloring in thing for grade 4s. This is primary school children where they have to color in the private parts. I mean, this is ridiculous. We have to stand up and say no. And I say, defy the government on this stuff. As a teacher, you cannot in good conscience teach this. As an SGB, you cannot allow this in. But that's just starting with grade 4. It gets worse as they get older. And this whole thing is pushing homosexuality, premarital sex, abortion, transgenderism. It's just woke indoctrination. If we can go on to the next slide. This is from Department of Basic Education's Early Childhood Development. Can I have the next slide? And what it's saying is, here is a picture of some boys playing as if they were girls, and it's saying, if you see this as a teacher, you must encourage it. And you must tell off any children that try and discourage those boys from playing around as girls. Okay? So that is not a good thing. Now, in terms of this, this detail of the CSE policy, we started off talking about that grade 4, then in grade 5 they learn about homosexual assault, in grade 8 they learn about abortion, and the teachers are told to be aware of parents' prejudices and the need to address. Now that's talking about us. That's saying that our views are prejudices. Okay? Then grade 9, they've got a graphic image of a woman's private parts and how to insert a female condom. Then in grade 11, they've got teaching that sexual orientation is not a choice, all about normalizing transgender and homosexuality. And they've got 5 role models, of which 3 are LGBT people. And one of them is, in fact, somebody who is normalizing pedophilia because he was involved in sex as a child, and he's trying to advocate that that was normal, okay? So this is, to me, just totally unacceptable. Let's go on to the next slide. Now, the good news is that Christians are speaking up, and the general news media is interested in what we have to say. I thank, therefore, Furlong Christians, who's a Western Cape leader of the ACDP, spoke up against this teaching homosexual sex education in the schools. There's another article there quoting myself, but if we speak up, the media is interested in this, because I think that unbelieving parents agree with us. They don't want their children to be taught this rubbish, but they want somebody else to do the speaking up. So let's use that opportunity. Everybody cares about their children. A lot of these other policies and laws that we try and advocate for, it is difficult to mobilize people because they can't think in their minds, how is this going to affect me? Difficult to mobilize people on the hate speech bill or the spy bill, but everybody is interested in education. So if you want people to vote for your party, that is a selling point, okay? People care about their own children. That's a competition between the different parties as to who is going to say we are offering the best thing for children. Every parent cares about that. Next slide, please. Now, these people have been trying very hard to silence us, and the Interior Minister of Finland is currently facing criminal charges for so-called hate speech just because she spoke up against this whole idea of same-sex marriage. But we can't be intimidated by this. We have to continue speaking up anyway. Sorry, can I have the next slide? Who is supposed to be looking after the slides? Can somebody keep them going, please? Because this is helping, it helps to understand. Okay. The next issue is the right not to be indoctrinated. We had last Friday at the University of Northwest, they had indoctrination on the issue of LGBT for the first year students. And one student, Sean Christie, spoke up and said that this is nonsense and they shouldn't have to listen to this, and they're not given the same opportunity to promote Christianity. And most of the students who were there in attendance walked out. And so that was a victory. The university expelled him and was suspended from coming to campus. We put this onto our YouTube channel, and so far there are 82,000 views, 4,000 likes, and almost 1,000 comments of people who are supporting the action that Sean Christie has taken. And Kenneth Meshu, in his speech at the State of the Nation, raised this issue and said to Cyril Ramaphosa, what are you doing to defend the rights of Christians who don't want to be indoctrinated? And I think this is a really wonderful case to build on the momentum. People have had enough. And so we need other people like Sean Christie to stand up at your school, at your workplace, at your university, and say, I'm not going to take this. Thankfully, they're now allowing him back into class, but he still has to face a disciplinary investigation. Next slide, please. Now, in the good news, in the United Kingdom, this little girl tragically was given puberty blockers to stop her from developing properly as a girl, and consequently she has kind of developed in a more masculine way. And when she reached a bit older, she realized, no, I am a girl, and this was a wrong decision. And so she sued the Department of Health and said, they need to stop doing this to children. And look, it's been a back and forth through the courts. And she would win one case, and they would win the appeal, and then she appeals it again. But in the process, they then did an investigation into the impacts of this on children, and they decided this is a bad idea. And so the UK government has changed its guidance. They are not advising puberty blockers for children as normative. They may still have it in clinical trials, but under normal circumstances, they won't. Likewise, Scandinavia, they probably the most woke country in the world, they have reversed their policy on giving these puberty blockers and hormone drugs to children because they've found that they don't improve in their mental health over the long term. They just get worse as they get older. So that is, and this has had an impact in the United States. Some of the Southern American states are starting to ban these things, and one of the major victories has come through the private sector, where the insurance companies have said, we are not going to insure doctors who do this. And so if they are sued then by the children, it's their own liability. Then the doctors say, no, we're not going to do this anymore, okay? Because they can be losing millions. They can lose their house. And so we are winning on this battle, but we need people with muscle to stand up to this nonsense. Okay, next slide. Now, I think you're going to be asking a big question. Those of you who can remember a number of years back, LGBT people were not so aggressive and they did not have such political support. So one has to ask, well, what has happened in the meantime that all of this has become like a platform political issue where people's jobs are being threatened? And the answer is that Marxists became disillusioned with economic Marxism in the 1960s. And they realized it was not working. It was not bringing the revolution that they hoped. And in the countries that it had had their revolution, it was not bringing the peace and prosperity that they'd hoped for. So they then started to rethink everything. And their intellectual leader was a person called Herbert Marcuse, who you have now next to Karl Marx. And what he proposed instead is that you stop just having economic Marxism and you spread Marxism out now to race and to gender and to LGBT, and you all form an alliance together to attack normative civilization and capitalism through all these different avenues, so that it's no longer just about class structure, but it still retains the same concept that there is a binary of a class struggle between an oppressed and an oppressor. It's just now that the LGBT are the oppressed and we heterosexuals are now the oppressors, and the women are the oppressed and the men are the oppressors and such like. And same for race, that you are automatically an oppressor if you have a light skin color, regardless of whether you've actually done anything in your life to oppress anybody. Okay, so you're automatically guilty in their minds. This was Herbert Marcuse's modification of Marxism. Now, I think one has to remember that just about every single woke academic in the world was previously an economic Marxist. Okay, they have just broadened their interest, and we have to see this as part of the same thing. Otherwise, we won't understand what they're doing or why they are so aggressive about it, because they are as aggressive as economic Marxists were. They just have a new utopia, which is woke utopia, and a new struggle and a broadened agenda. Next slide, please. And so we mustn't be surprised if they are totalitarian. They want to force this on everybody. They even want to force on their own people. If somebody, for example, disagrees with one point in the woke agenda, they might agree with homosexuality, but they disagree on immigration or other way around, they're going to go for them, because these people are Marxist in mentality and they want to force everybody. And once you expose this, that this is what these people are doing, one suddenly wins over a whole lot of unbelieving people to realize, no, we don't want everybody controlling us, because they might agree with one of those things and disagree on another one, but they want the freedom to be able to decide what their view is, okay? Whereas these cultural Marxists want to force every single point of their agenda on everybody. And I wouldn't be surprised if in 5 years' time there's a new bunch of things, and I can guess what some of those are going to be, onto their agenda that you have to believe in order to be not cancelled. Next slide. So now we also have to look contextually, where is this coming from? This is postmodernism, and it is the person who invented the term postmodernism originally called it paganism. Okay, he later changed the words in his academic paper to postmodernism. Okay, because and the difference is that it is what you call multi-authority. We believe in one God, one authority. Some other people, like classical economic Marxists, also believe in one authority, that is the state. Postmodernists don't believe that. They believe in lots of authorities, and so nothing can actually be absolutely right, because truth is just everybody's opinion unless they're forcing it on you. And if you're going to believe that, you are letting go of reality. And one of these key philosophers of postmodernism has argued we have to reject objective reality because objective reality is too much like God. Okay? Right? So, the consequence is, once you have rejected reality, objective reality, then you can make things up as you wish. You can make up same-sex marriage, gender change, all genders are the same, unborn or not people. And we have to realize this is an Alice in Wonderland world where they are inventing nonsense. And we have to point this out, because even if somebody is not a Christian, they can see that these people are full of contradictions on every single point. Next slide, please. So the question is this new? No. This is St. Cyprian of Carthage. He was arguing against pagan transgenderism because they also had gender confusion and sexual confusion in the Roman Empire. This is Benjamin Keach. He was a Baptist revivalist in Britain, 17th century, before the Evangelical Awakening, and he was bemoaning how the growth of homosexuality and how this has become normative. And in both cases, they won. It was reversed. We can do it again. These people don't have final victory. We will defeat them because we have truth on our side, we have God on our side, we have the miraculous power of God, we have basic logic. These other people don't have logic. We just have to expose their lack of logic. They are just full of contradictions and nonsense. They're just intimidating people. Next slide. So with the situation, we need to wake up parents, and I think it's mostly been mothers who've been speaking up against this nonsense in education. We need to wake up dads as well. And what authority do we have to argue our case? Next slide. We have the Bible, which gives us a mandate to bring our children up in the way of the Lord and delegates that authority to parents, not to the state. The state can help, but it's primarily us. Then we have the United Nations International Declaration of Human Rights, Universal Declaration of Human Rights. It says children must be brought up in and parents have a prior right to decide the type of education their children have to receive. We need to hold the government accountable to that, because this is not just a Christian opinion. Most of the world has agreed that this is what they want. Most South Africans believe that this is what they want. We need to hold them accountable to that. In the Western Cape particularly, it's in the Western Cape Constitution that children are to be brought up in a system of their parents' choice. Next slide. So we need to speak up against the capture of our education by the BELA bill. We need to assert the rights of school governing bodies, the rights of homeschooling parents, and the rights of individuals in terms of conscientious objection, and also the rights of independent schools to be founded. And we also want to expand this so that we can have more and more smaller independent schools that are run on a cottage school basis. Next slide. Now, the question is, what are you going to do about this? And I think if you just go and spend the next couple of weeks fighting everything that you see that you don't like, the consequence is that you will burn out. And then after that couple of weeks, you will not be fighting anymore. Okay, so that is not the strategy we want to do. We are growing people. That's part of why you're here, to grow. And I'd like you to each think of 4 people that when you go home, you can go and tell them what you learned here today. Okay, so you grow people to equip them so that they can be leaders and make a difference. Then we need to build organizations. We cannot just work as individuals. I know we've got representatives from homeschooling organizations here, we've got political party, we've got other educational groups, we've got activist groups. One needs to raise membership, raise funds, raise membership lists, have meetings, because without this, you run out of energy on your own. Because when one person is tired, then in an organization, another person can carry on. And thirdly, with that energy of strong individuals, strong organizations, then we fight the causes. We don't just fight the causes and then burn out and become another casualty in the statistics rate. So next slide. Now, I would like to encourage you to choose one issue that's going to be your issue that you're going to fight on out of what's come out of this conference. You can't fight all of it. There's too much. You have to pick your one that you are going to take up and learn about, and then bother the government or whatever institution. You choose what institution are you going to be trying to push your viewpoint across. We've got SGB elections coming up in March, and please, if you want to defend your child, rather defend them from the high ground of being on the SGB than from the low ground of some woke mummy being on the SGB and telling them all that they need to hand out gender pronoun badges. Okay, then there's your role. Are you going to be a prayer? Are you going to be a speaker? Are you going to be an organizer? God doesn't call everybody to do the same thing. So think, what does God call you to do? Pray what God does call you to do. I'm sure God will answer you if you honestly ask Him. Then there's the issue of networking, and that's part of why we're here. And I would love you to chat to me, but also the other people who are here, so that you can make contacts that can exchange information and help each other. Maybe you've got a publicity channel that they don't have, or they have information that you don't have, and they can give you some wisdom, advice, or experience to help you to be more successful. So this is how we move from being aware of the threat and the scope of it to having knowing our counter strategy, and then also building that into organizational reaction so that we can mobilize in a sustainable way and an impactful way, that then we're not just standing as individuals who can be taken out by the enemy or worn out by a lack of energy. So thanks very much.